Hey, Canucks fans. Hey, hockey fans. I am thrilled to launch my series over the next 4 nights. Division previews of what's going to be a weird season, this 2021 NHL season. And I thought we should start with the Canadian division, given I live in Vancouver and we're part of this Canadian division, the North division. I thought no better person to start us off and to help us, no other than John Viveiros of Hot Take Hockey. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Clay, for having me. I really appreciate it. When you reached out to me, I was obviously pretty excited. I told you, I was like, man, I wanted to collab with Clay. I should have had you on first, but I appreciate coming on for your channel and talking about the North Division.
No, and I will say, in all seriousness, we were joking around before I pressed the record button, but despite you being 25 years my junior, I am old enough to be your dad. I do look up to you, and I respect everything that you do on your channel, the streams, going 11 hours straight, marathon man. But the funniest story is I was doing a post-game live stream when the Canucks were doing their miraculous playoff run back in August, and then I see all these people come in the chat, and I can't remember what word they were saying. Do you remember what you got them to say?
We're watching you.
And I actually turned to my son, Sean, who is way cooler than I am. I said, I think I'm getting hacked. And then finally it was HTH raid, HTH. And then I learned what a raid was for that night. And I want to thank you for bringing a bunch of new, not even subs, just that energy into the chat room. So you're not going to hack me today either. Is that fair to say?
No hacking. Don't worry.
Awesome. Thanks, John. John, before we get into the North Division, tell us a bit about you quickly and your channel. And I know you've crested over the 23,000 sub mark, which is awesome. So tell us a bit about what you do on your channel.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. So the channel for myself has been going the last couple of years. The account was created a little before that, and I was doing kind of like a podcast and recap setting for a lot of games with a couple other guys. And then it was dead for a bit. And I was in my program for sports broadcasting in university. And I was like, you know what? I want to take this on. I want to actually do something on YouTube. And I mean, my buddy was taking it on with football. And I was like, you know what? This is a great opportunity. There's a growing kind of atmosphere right now for hockey on YouTube. And this was back in 2018. And I was like, let's do it. So I started doing a lot of live streams that I had already done with other guys. And I started doing it on my own, doing play-by-play reaction, stuff like that, doing kind of daily videos. And I would still kind of do some reaction recap kind of things. But I started doing kind of daily videos. So whether it was like trade rumors or big news in the NHL or just reacting or breaking down each trade, that was kind of my vibe. And I mean, now it's grown a lot. I think for the majority part of live streams, I'd say a lot of my growth, we'll say 60-70% has been based on live streams. And that's kind of been my success point. So that's what I'm enjoying a lot right now. But I do, especially as I graduate in April, I'm hoping to get a lot more into the video scene again. So that's kind of what I'm doing right now. But yeah, I just do all 31, soon to be 32 teams, I guess. Seattle's coming to the picture. And then, yeah, I am a Leaf fan, but I think I would like to think I'm not too biased because I think I have been able to spread it out quite a bit. And obviously we're hoping to represent the rest of the Canadian teams here and Clay's Canucks. So
yeah, perfect. That's perfect. Well, we'll see about that bias in about half an hour. No, that's fine. But yes, yeah. I know you're out of Toronto, so I know you know all 31 teams quite well. But I thought you'd be a perfect person to speak to about not just the Leafs, but all 7 Canadian teams. So let's set it up. The North Division, the Canadian Division, a division that's bringing teams from 3 different divisions into one for this one season, playing each other 9 or 10 times. I'm not sure how that's going to work. So let's go team by team. And honestly, John, just give me your impressions on how well you think they're going to do. So let's start with Calgary. They finished 19th overall last season. They finished 8th in the West. They beat Winnipeg in the qualifying round, but they lost in 6 games to Dallas in the first round. What do you think of the Flames, or as some people in Vancouver bitterly are calling them, the Calgary Canucks?
Yeah, the Calgary Canucks are right. I mean, look at the guys they brought into the picture. I think that's kind of starts with the goaltending and Markstrom. My biggest thing for Calgary is they didn't have a goalie. I mean, Riddick was there, Cam Talbot that was there, Mike Smith was there, all guys that have kind of been like that borderline. Like sometimes they step up, sometimes like they look like one of the worst goalies in the league. I think we can confidently say Markstrom has been I mean, at least a top 10, but I mean, he's looked like at times a top 5 goalie in this league. And I think, and I said this many times, if he didn't get hurt last year, I mean, I think he would have been in that Vezina conversation, in that top 3. I mean, he was already in that Vezina conversation. So I love Markstrom. If he can play the way that we know he can play, Calgary's got their goalie, at least for this year. We don't know how the rest of that contract goes as he gets older, but at least for this year, if Markstrom can be the guy, they got their goaltender. And defense, I've always said the Flames have one of the better defenses, like up and down their lineup. You have Shillington, Valimaki, some of the younger guys coming in. You have now Tanev, who basically replaces Brody, maybe more of a defensive shutdown guy, and Giordano's the guy there. Hannafin hopefully will bounce back. So you have the defense, and then the forward group, I would say balanced out, but like huge question marks. Will Gaudreau bounce back? What is Monahan right now? Lindholm, Kachuk's hopefully the leader. So for the Calgary Flames, my impressions, maybe the most balanced team in the Canadian division, definitely up there. My biggest problem is, do they have the firepower up front in comparison to some of these other teams? And do they have the depth that some of these other teams have up front? I think their defense is solid. I think their goaltending is solid. But kind of my impressions on the Flames, I think that they're a team that might have to adjust early on, but if they do make the playoffs, they could match up well against a lot of other teams.
Yeah, well said, John. And I think a lot of people have been thinking that Johnny Gaudreau, he can only go up, basically. A really disappointing season last season. He's obviously a huge cog, but you look at the names, you're right, Kachuk and Lindholm, Gaudreau, Monahan. There's a lot of firepower up there, but it didn't seem to click last season for whatever reason.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think chemistry might be a huge thing there, but also we saw that Lindholm, Monahan, and Gaudreau at times were the best line in the Western Conference, or one of the best lines there. Obviously, we now see that Avalanche line and get a little bit scared, but I think with that Calgary line, like that was something to watch out for. But I think now, like you're seeing in Calgary, Matthew Tkachuk has taken a step over Johnny Gaudreau as that guy in Calgary, and everyone's kind of waiting to see if Johnny Gaudreau can step back and admire what Kachuk's doing, but also be like that secondary guy still and be maybe a superstar in Calgary. So it's like, it's kind of the balance. You got the Tkachuk physicality, and Kachuk's going to make a lot of noise, but Gaudreau's obviously really sneaky with that speed. It's going to be tough. I think with Calgary, like I said, the Vancouver Edmonton matchups for me, like, are going to be the most obviously intriguing. They're always the most intriguing because like, I think Calgary against the other teams, I'm thinking Ottawa, Montreal, like I think they might have an advantage there, where when you talk about rivalries with Vancouver and Edmonton, anything can happen, right?
No, well said. And just to tie a bow on that, yes, Markstrom and Tanev, really good players for the Vancouver Canucks, of course. A lot of people were happy we didn't give out the contracts necessarily that Markstrom 6 years got, Tanev 4 years got, but we obviously want them to see them do well, just not when they're playing against Vancouver. All right, let's move on to the other Alberta team, Edmonton. They actually finished the highest out of all 7 Canadian teams last year at 12th overall in points percentage, 5th in the West, but they were ousted by the Chicago Blackhawks in 4 games in the qualifying round. I kind of know who we need to start with when we talk about the Oilers, but what do you think of not only those two guys, but the rest of their lineup?
Yeah, I think obviously I'll talk about like where I think they're finishing when we talk about the standings, but this is a team, and it showed last year. McDavid, Draisaitl, they're going to give you a tough time in the season. They're going to give you the most pressure that any other duo in the league is going to give currently. McDavid, Draisaitl, in my opinion, is the best duo in the league when they're on together. And you know what? People will say, oh, well, they don't play together. They don't play together 5-on-5. Well, you know what? When you have the best power play unit and you have Draisaitl and McDavid against you for 2 full minutes, then that's kind of scary, I think. So I think the biggest thing is you do not want to give up power play time, or you don't want to give that power play time and get penalties against this team. So for McDavid, Draisaitl, that's going to be the duo. Nothing's changing with that duo. And for the Oilers, the big thing they improved is their depth up front. I think when you look at that secondary unit or kind of that bottom 6, it was a huge problem. And you know what? I'm not sure if they improved it enough, but at least they brought in the pieces they needed. They brought in Kyle Turris, who hopefully will be a third-line center. Puljujarvi's coming back. Kenny bounced back. They brought guys back like Tyler Ennis. Zach Kassian's still there. Hopefully he can do something more than he did in the playoffs. And then a lot of my Oilers subscribers always talk about it, and I've been a big guy, is like Nugent Hopkins is always the guy that gets overlooked there, and I do think he's a very good number 3. Does he get talked about enough? Maybe not. But I do think some of the guys they have on the wing now, Nugent Hopkins, Yamamoto, some of these guys can do well. I'm just, man, I mean, Clay, we can get into it, but the goaltending, defense, like what happened there? I want to rant about this, even though I'm not an Oilers fan. Like, how can you lose to the 23 seed going into the playoffs, well, the play-ins, and stay with those 2 goalies? Like, they didn't change. This was the year that I've never seen so many goalies in the open market.
Yes.
There were so many goalies in the open market, and the Edmonton Oilers go, okay, let's stay with Koskinen and Mike Smith. I just don't get it. You know what? They made some changes on the defense. They brought in Tyson Barrie.
Yeah.
Brought in a couple depth guys, but no Clefbaum for the season. And Darnell Nurse wants to be the guy. I don't know if Edmonton's working out on the defensive goaltending right now.
No, you think about the Edmonton Oilers, and yeah, obviously you can't fault McDavid and Draisaitl, but you look at their how bad they were on the D, and then they find out that Clefbaum's out. Now Barrie will help a little bit, but he's not the most defensive player, as you know, watching him in Toronto for a year. So it's going to be interesting. And you're right, the Nurse, he's a gamer for sure, but you talk about the two Alberta teams and the kind of rotating cast of characters in the net. Whereas Calgary shored up their goaltending, Edmonton did. Yeah. That's a really good point, actually. Yeah.
And the one thing I'll say on top of that is just, again, I think Edmonton, while I'm it feels like I'm maybe being negative about them, this is more of like a playoff thing for me. Like this team, this is like an early kind of preview statement. Like this team is not built right now to maybe make severe noise, but I think this Canadian division is the hardest to predict. So
yes,
you'll wait to see my predictions, but Edmonton might actually match up well against some of these teams because of again, McDavid, Draisaitl. You take those two guys out of the team, then we're talking about a whole different story, but it is McDavid and Draisaitl.
And you make a great point, John, about the Canadian division, the North division being the hardest to predict because the highest team was 12th, but then they had 5 or 6 teams all smushed in between that 12th, that second third of the season, that middle group, I should say, of teams. So the second worst team was Montreal last year of the Canadian teams. They finished 24th. They snuck in. They grabbed that last spot, 12th in the East. They beat Pittsburgh in the qualifying round. Then they lost 6 games to Philly in the first round. A lot of noise with the Canadians over the offseason. Tell us about it.
Yeah, they're definitely, I'd say, the most improved in this division. And I would also say I made the statement of Calgary might be the most balanced in this division. I mean, Montreal might be the most balanced. They brought in one of the best backup goalies in the league in Jake Allen. Mm-hmm. They shored up that defense. You have Alexander Romanov coming to the picture. So now you're looking at a top 6 that's pretty solid. And it was already solid. And now your forward group, you have, and you could say it, Clay, you have a potential first liner on your third line now. I mean, Tyler Toffoli, I wouldn't say he's an all-star first liner, but he can be on that first line and produce. And now on the depth chart right now, hypothetically, if you have what I think should be the second line or first line for Montreal of Duran, Suzuki, and Anderson, if you keep the other line together with Tatar, Gallagher, and Deneau together, that leaves Toffoli on the third line, which for me is crazy. I think that's so crazy. So if Toffoli can maybe help out a guy like Kotkaniemi, and then you get Armia as well, or maybe Lekin on that third line, Montreal's got 3 lines that can get you every night. Do they have
Perry and Frolik running around on the fourth line?
Yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean, they have a bunch of extra guys there. Wheel, Byron, bunch of guys, Jake Evans. So it's crazy for me, but they don't have a McDavid Draisaitl. They don't have a Matthews Marner, but they have 3 different lines that will get you in the matchup game, and it showed against Pittsburgh. So, well, you know what? Against Montreal, you might focus on 2 of those lines. That third line might get you in a sneaky way.
Great points. They bring in Joel Edmondson to help out in blue line, as you mentioned. And then, now a tandem of Price and Allen in the nets. That's pretty good.
Yeah, so Carey Price is the guy. Carey Price is the guy.
Do you see any weaknesses on this team, or is it because maybe they don't have the high-end talent, say, like you said, Toronto or Edmonton does?
Yeah, I think this team, like it always has, is going to make or break with Carey Price. I think if they're going to go far. I think this team at the very least will compete every single night and will be in every game. This is a team that I feel like is going to, I don't want to say never get blown out, but just with all their depth and now their great goalie tandem, they're a team that's going to be in every single game, in my opinion. So, I would say every team in this division, it's so hard to predict, but I think with Montreal, it's a good bet that they have a chance to be kind of towards the end of that playoff spot, maybe one of those last playoff spots. But if Carey Price plays like he played in the play-in round or the playoffs, or if he plays the way he has in past years, whether it was 2017, 2018, then Montreal has a shot to do really well in this division. But I do think, the weaknesses are the top scoring. Like, I feel like this is a team that definitely could go through scoring droughts.
Yeah.
If like a couple of their scorers, like while they have the depth, Josh Anderson like didn't do much last year. Kotkaniemi, Gallagher, some of these guys have shown to go through a major goal. So outside of that, like then it's Tatar and Toffoli. Like, are they really premier goal scorers? Like,
right.
Not so much, right? But they're good goal scorers. It's just a matter of sometimes you do need that guy to carry you out of a funk. And Edmonton has McDavid, Toronto has Matthews, even Calgary has a couple stars. Montreal doesn't have that. So while they have that depth and have maybe the most balanced team in this division, if they go through that rough kind of patch, they don't really have that star to get them out of it. So that's kind of my only concern outside of Price, but he saves the pucks. He doesn't put them in.
Well said about the goaltending depth, because when you're playing so many games as they are, 3 and 4, 6 and 8, you're going to need at least 2, if not 3 goalies going this season. Very good. All right, let's go to Ottawa. They finished second last and 30th, didn't qualify obviously for the play-in, the only Canadian team not to do so, but they turned over half their roster. They have an all-star rookie coming in. What can we expect from these Senators this year?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I want to look for a lot of positives, and I think that I will see a lot of positives, but it's just, can you really confidently predict them outside of that 7th spot? Like, what is going to get them maybe in a 6th spot or a 5 spot in this division, or maybe to upset teams in a season series? I think based on the Canadian matchups and based on the rivalries, like I've always said this, no matter how bad Ottawa or Toronto are, or like if the other team's really good and the other team's really bad, that's the Battle of Ontario, right? Anything can happen. So do I think Ottawa is going to steal wins? 100%. I mean, every year, even the worst team will get wins. But I think with Ottawa, it's just a matter of like getting the experience and getting the guys into the roles you're going to see going forward. So I think really relying on a guy like Brady Tkachuk, really integrating Stützle into the kind of the fold. Josh Norris is a guy that I would love to see alongside Brady Tkachuk, because I think with Colin White, he's shown to be very inconsistent, and maybe in a second or third line role, it's probably more efficient for him. Where Josh Norris, well, I don't see him as a top line centerman going forward. I think he's a guy to look forward to. Batherson's another guy that could come into the picture. I think with the defense, it's promising, but only on the guys that are like not going to be there this year. So like you have the younger guys that are maybe going to get a little bit of time, but probably in the AHL. I don't know what, like, I mean, I guess Dorian was getting like a little chatter from Melnick to save the money this year, but I mean, Goodbranson, like some of these guys they brought in the defense, like it's just kind of fillers for this year, right? And then the goaltending,
Matt Murray.
I don't know. I don't know what Matt Murray we're getting, honestly. I mean, last year with the Pens was not a pretty Matt Murray. He's joining a worse defense, so I don't know what we're going to get. I would like to think we're getting a bounce back Matt Murray, but he doesn't have too much around him. So all the respect to the Sens, I think they have one of the brighter futures. Out of these teams, they have a great prospect pool and they have a great future. It's just going to take some time. So that's kind of my summary and first kind of impressions for the Sens.
I think that's a fair summary. And the guys that they have brought in, you mentioned Goodbranson's a perfect example of Galchenyuk, Paquette, Coburn. They're not guys that are going to put them over the hump, and they're not going to move them up 3 or 4 places in the standings, but at least they'll be competitive. Okay, I think that's enough said. Let's move on to first your favorite team and then my favorite team. Let's go with the Toronto Maple Leafs. They finished 13th overall, 8th in the East, and they lost in 5 games to the Blue Jackets in the qualifying round. Brought in some depth, but I'll let you talk to this team. About this team.
Yeah, so I mean, anyone that saw, I wasn't too happy after that series last year. But you know what? I think the Leafs are always a team for me. You never know what to expect. Well, I mean, sometimes you just expect to get disappointed. But in general, throughout the season, it's a lot of up and down. It's a lot of you lose to a Zamboni driver, but then you look like a top tier team. Like it's just up and down. But I will say with the Leafs, they took the steps towards becoming that complete team, to becoming either the Washington Capitals or the Tampa Bay Lightning. I don't know if they're completely there yet, but they made those steps. So the lack on the defense, you brought in Brody, you brought in Mikko Lehtinen, sorry. I was thinking of the Finland World Juniors right now. Mikko Lehtinen. And then for the forward group, you brought in a little bit more size. You lost Clifford, so Simmons is basically just like the more offensive guy. Like, well, I wouldn't say offensive guy, but he provides more offense than Clifford is what I'm trying to say, but with the same physicality, I would say. And then Thornton, I mean, he's 41. You can only get so much, but I think the experience is going to be good in the locker room. Same with Spezza.
Yeah.
So they made like small steps, but like in a big way. I think the Brody one is going to prove to be like a huge addition alongside Morgan Rielly.
So Brody upgrade over Barry for sure.
100%. The Leafs, I thought when they got Barry, I thought it was going to be good because I thought, you know what, now you have a guy beside Muzzin who pushes play, and then Muzzin's that solid defensive guy. Babcock kind of ruined that experiment. It didn't work out, and then they never went back to it. And then I thought Rielly was going to get time with maybe Justin Hall or Barry, and then he kind of did. It didn't work out. But now at least you have two potential guys to fill in on the penalty kill and like top matchups. I would love to see Brody and Muzzin. I talked about this in my Leaf preview videos. Like Brody Muzzin is kind of comparable. I'm not saying Muzzin's as good as Giordano as he has been in the last couple of years, but Muzzin and Giordano, like in terms of style of play, not too far off, right? So I just think Muzzin and Brody could be those two guys for Toronto that I'm not saying they're the pairings regularly on 5-on-5, but on the top penalty kill against top matchups. And then you have Morgan Rielly, do your thing, buddy. Put up numbers, do your thing. Top power play unit now. Barry's not taking that spot. And then, I mean, everyone talks about the top six. And I think with the top six, it's all just talk because we saw in game 5 last year, 0 goals. So I think with Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander, they just got to step up. And I'm kind of hoping that the Canadian rivalries and being in the Canadian division like brings the best out of them.
Yeah, 2 more quick questions about Lisa. I'm fascinated. Actually, 3 real quick ones. Are you worried about replacing the skill of Kapanen and Johnson?
Yeah, Johnson and Kapanen bring that extra scoring and that kind of secondary scoring. I think I am a little bit worried about it, but I think also the Leafs are hoping for that guy like Nick Robertson to step up in the season. So a lot of Leaf fans are kind of tagging Robertson as like that underrated Calder Canada this year. I wouldn't go that far. Maybe that's a huge hot take, but I think with Robertson, maybe he steps up at some point in the season with Tavares and Nylander, for example, or maybe in that third line as secondary scoring. So I'm thinking Robertson and maybe like one of the guys of like VC or Mikheyev. I'm not saying VC's good, but I'm just saying one of those guys hopefully will at least put up the production that is lost with a guy like Johnson. Yeah. And Johnson was hurt for like a lot of the end and the playoffs, but I'm thinking with Kapanen, maybe that's Nick Robertson that steps up and kind of fills that void for what we're losing with Kapanen.
Cool. And you can tell I don't talk about the Leafs much when I called him Johnson and not Johnson. Second question.
That's all right.
I've read a lot about that Anderson, Frederick Anderson has really improved his game. Did you see that improvement at the end of the season and through the quick playoffs for them?
I mean, you know what, Clay? Definitely in the play-in round for sure. Yeah. Like I think it's too soon to see if Anderson I don't want to say too soon, but I think it's kind of like, let's see how the season goes. Cause Anderson for me is like, he'll go on this like separate, like kind of train of games or separate kind of chunk of games where he looks like the best goalie in the league or one of the best goalies in the league. And then he'll go an extra section where it's like Anderson, like, what's up? I think this guy, I mean, time and time again, I wouldn't blame him last year, but against the Capitals and against the Bruins, sometimes in big games, he kind of lets in squeakers. He lets in bad goals. And game 5, I mean, the 1 goal from Foudy was a squeaker. So he's like the classic goalie that makes these crazy saves and then lets in just a bad goal. So it's weird. He didn't have a good season at all. So I think if you're looking for one of the goalies in this division to bounce back or at least step up, it would be Frederick Anderson this season.
Cool. And this last question is a perfect segue to the Canucks, who are next. And be honest, because in Vancouver, we get so excited about the Vancouver-Toronto games and, we hate them. They hate it. Well, actually, we don't. That's what I'm going to ask you. I don't know if they hate us, but we hate them. We want to beat them. Toronto Sports Network, blah, blah, blah. Truly, do people in Toronto even care about the Canucks or the games against the Canucks?
You know what? It's interesting. I think a lot of, and again, I don't claim like sometimes half my fan base that wants to be toxic and wants to be too overboard on Twitter, but I will say this. I think there's always kind of a target on the back of Leaf fans because of, like you said, TSN and kind of the big networks being in Toronto. And I'm like right here. I know what goes down, right? I know everything that's kind of around here, but I think like it's kind of, I mean, it's out of my control. Like, how am I at fault here? So I don't know. I mean, you know what? I think I kind of pay more attention to the rivalry of maybe like Montreal right now. I wouldn't say I think I give the respect to Vancouver for sure. Well, I know I give the respect to Vancouver, but I think some Leaf fans, I think they kind of just entertain it. I would say, yeah, you know what, Vancouver fans, I think the target on the back for some Leaf fans is definitely unwarranted, but I can kind of see where the toxic behavior goes back and forth between Canucks fans. And obviously, I think you know what happened after Boston in 2011. And then with Toronto, it's kind of it's a mess after losing to Boston a few times in the playoffs and choking. So it's just kind of like, why don't we just come together and hate Boston together? I think
exactly. Misery loves company. Exactly. So let's talk about the Canucks. I think people it'll be a breath of fresh air for people to hear someone else aside from me talk about their impressions of the team. But they came in 17th overall, 7th in the West. They beat Minnesota in the qualifying round, dethroned the St. Louis Blues in round 1, and then lost to Vegas in a hard-fought series in 7 games in the second round. And we've lost some players, gaining a couple. But what's your impression of the Vancouver Canucks?
So I think the Canucks, for me, based on what I see right now, I think in the grand scheme of things, they didn't get worse and they didn't get better, I think that's kind of the best way to describe it. They kind of replaced what they lost in different ways. Like I think with Tanev, you're kind of getting more of that defensive shutdown guy, but with Schmidt, you're getting more of that two-way game. So you're going to see Schmidt being able to drive play a little bit more. The one concern I'll say, Clay, about the Canucks, and maybe this is being talked about, I'm not too sure, but I've talked about it a lot, is Quinn Hughes. I think it's being overlooked on how much of a great impact Tanev was on Quinn Hughes. For me, Tanev, and that's why I said I would have loved Toronto or Ottawa to sign Tanev, because I think Tanev would have been a perfect pair for a guy like Shabbat or a guy like Riley, because you saw what Tanev did for Quinn Hughes. Quinn Hughes was able to just be free, do his thing, let Tanev take the tough matchups, let Tanev take a hit, let Tanev do whatever, Tanev was taking the tough kind of time for that pair, and Quinn Hughes was doing his thing. Who's that guy this year for Quinn Hughes? I mean, Nate Schmidt can be a great partner, but is Nate Schmidt, and I've seen a lot of kind of mock lineups, is Nate Schmidt playing with Edler? Where is he going, right? And for Quinn Hughes, I don't know if the guy for him is Myers. I saw Myers take stupid penalties. I saw Myers lose his awareness in the defensive zone. I just don't know, Clay, if a top defense pairing of Myers, who loses his head or just loses awareness in the defensive zone, along with Quinn Hughes, who I actually think gets overlooked for his defensive abilities. I actually think he's underrated for his defensive abilities. I think for a smaller guy, he actually does okay. But I think Tanev also helped him a lot in that category. So that's my bigger concern for sure.
That is an outstanding question, John. And just before save that point, because I want to say, you may have heard, and we're recording this on Sunday, in full disclosure, we're releasing this on Tuesday. They just announced this morning that they're bringing in Travis Hamonic on a PTO. So perhaps he is almost the same as Chris Tanev, like a right shot D-man, best days behind him, injury prone, but might play that stay-at-home role. So he might be the answer to the pairing with Quinn Hughes. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, what? I saw the PTO, and for me, I was just trying to think. I was like, okay, so does that mean some of the younger guys, whether it's Rafferty or Ulevi or some of the guys that, I mean, we've been talking about and you've talked about and Canucks fans have been talking about, does that take their spot away? Because at the end of the day, it slides a bunch of guys down if Hamonic maybe gets an opportunity with Quinn Hughes. I think Hamonic, yes, like you said, he's probably like we'll call it a Walmart version of Chris Tanev. He's kind of like he's a less of what Chris Tanev brings, but kind of the same style. And yes, you said it best. His best days are behind him. So I'm just worried that, again, if you have Hamonic up there, can he play the 23, the 24 minutes a night? Plus he's injury prone, plus he just left. Like, he's the one that opted out. He's one of the guys that opted out. So, like, we just don't know how healthy he is. So I guess that could be an option. But I think with the Canucks, Toffoli is going to be a decent loss, I'd say. I think the chunk of the offense there in that top six is still there. But I have high hopes for the Canucks. And I actually, as a Leafs fan, I mean, when you said, like, Leaf fans and Canucks fans going at each other, I actually like the Canucks. I have no ill will or hate towards the Canucks, and I actually like watching them a lot. I just, for this year, I hope they do well, but, like, there's just so many concerns going in my head. Like, JT Miller had a breakout year. Can he replicate that? I think that's also not being kind of questioned enough, because like, that was a great year JT Miller had. Like, a year that, like, from what he was doing with, like, Tampa Bay and the Rangers previously, like, not many players take that much of a jump. He looked like an all-star. He looked like a top-notch, great top line winger for the Canucks. Like he was dominating on the power play. He was dominating 5-on-5. I was like, where was this JT Miller in years past? So I hope he replicates it, but that's also a question mark.
Oh, it's a massive question mark. And I was watching some of your videos, and I saw I was watching your fantasy picks, your fantasy draft picks vlog, and you mentioned Braden Holtby as maybe. Did you put him in the bust or be careful?
Yeah, I said I put him. Well, I put a bunch of busts, but I said for him, yes, be careful, because I think with what we saw from Demko, those games could easily get split. And I'm not saying that this is one of the better tandems in the division for sure. I mean, I think Demko and Holtby are going to balance each other well. But yeah, for fantasy owners, I would say just be careful with Holtby, because I think with Demko, I'm so excited for Demko. I think look what he did in the playoffs. That was unreal. So I think, you know what, if Demko struggles at any point, Holtby will step in. But I think for the Canucks, and this was kind of what I was saying about the Capitals, you kind of want to get the guy going. You want to integrate the guy in the situation. Like, I wouldn't want to see Holtby play 45 of the 56 games and have Demko taking too much of a step back, because let's be real, Holtby might be gone as soon as the expansion draft. He most likely will get picked in the expansion draft. So I think you kind of want to have Holtby there and maybe split it 50-50, but you want to get that action for Demko, because as soon as this year's up, it could be Demko by himself. Well said.
Well said. And let's move on to the last team by alphabetical order, Winnipeg, 20th overall, 9th in the West. They lost 3 in 4 games to Calgary in the qualifying round. A lot of talent on this team, maybe not so much in the back end in front of Hellebuck, though. What do you see?
Yeah, I think this one's like tough for me, because it goes back to like the Canadian division being the toughest to predict. If it goes back to what we usually see, Pacific Central, Atlantic, Metro, I might have Winnipeg in the playoffs. But like, it's so tough. Like, I don't know if I want to say they're in the playoffs or they're not in the playoffs, because to me, like, they're a good team. Like, they're a well-structured upfront team. They have one of the better top sixes in the league, and they have Hellebuck, the Vezina guy. Like, they have Hellebuck, who just won the Vezina. But yeah, it goes back to what you're saying. What defense are we going to see this year? Because you have Josh Morrissey, who I think is very overlooked as a number one guy. I think on a lot of teams, he would definitely be a number 2, just based on his fit and his style of play. You have Neil Pionk, who I actually like the fit on the power play. He was good for Winnipeg. Dylan DeMello was a great pickup for them. After that, then you're kind of shrugging your shoulders. You're kind of like, what's going on, right? I think Billy Hinola, we're seeing it in the World Juniors right now. He'll probably step in and get an opportunity with Winnipeg. And they have a couple depth guys, but obviously I think that's kind of the big thing screaming around Winnipeg right now is they have no defense, and they kind of lost defensemen like slow. Well, it all happened so fast for the big three, but they've kind of gotten weaker defensively slowly, like no Bufflin, no Myers, no Trouba. And then it was kind of all gone for them. But I mean, in terms of the offense, I don't think anyone should doubt that top 6, but then there's also the Roslovic and Laine wanting to get traded. So then those are going to be lingering around the Jets this year as well. So that's another just huge question mark in itself.
Great point. And you take away that drama and you just look at the names. It's comparable to Toronto in that Connor, Scheifele, Wheeler, Laine, and Ehlers. That's a good group of 4 or 5 players, but you're right. For some, it might be a chemistry thing similar to Calgary as well. Okay. So John, we've gone through the 7 teams now. Explain it however you want, but I would love to know how you think these 7 teams are going to finish. Maybe a predicted order of standings for these 7 Canadian teams.
Yes. So, and Montreal fans, I gotta say,
I love it when you start by.
I gotta go Montreal fans, because Clay, I gotta say this. So we talked about it before we were recording.
Yeah.
For me, especially in this division, for me, there's a difference between power rankings, the teams that I think are the best, and how teams match up against each other and how things are going to go well. And I talked to a couple Habs fans, and they made a great point, and I had talked about it in the past. This Habs team or the Habs organization has the best record, I think, out of all the Canadian teams against the rest of the Canadian teams. Like, they have a great record against the other Canadian teams. So that's something to consider. If I was going based on power rankings, and I'll just quickly start with power rankings.
Yeah.
I'm definitely going Ottawa 7.
Yeah.
I'm going maybe Winnipeg 6 or Montreal 6. Then the other one, Winnipeg, Montreal. Then I'm going, so 5. And then I'm going 4. I'm going Edmonton or Vancouver, and then the same thing. So I'll go Edmonton, then Vancouver 3. I'll go 2 Calgary, and I'll go 1 Toronto. So, I mean, based on power rankings, I think Toronto's the best team going in. But predictions, this is different. And I made my video for my predictions. This is different. 7 Ottawa, 6 Winnipeg. Canucks fans, I'm sorry. I'm going 5 Canucks. This is why. If you go back on the records of Vancouver and Edmonton games, it looks like Edmonton over the last 3 years has Vancouver's number. And based on what went down, I don't know if Vancouver got an edge on Edmonton yet. Goaltending, 100% it's Edmonton. Like that's, or Vancouver, sorry. No question. Goaltending, Vancouver's the better for goaltending, Edmonton's. But outside of that, then I'm kind of like questioning it, especially with the forward group. Edmonton improved. Yep. So I'm thinking right now, based on predictions, Vancouver is going to be either anywhere from that 3 to 5 spot. I think they could make the playoffs and be in that 3 or 4 spot, or just missing that 5 spot. So for Canucks fans watching, I hope you get in the 3 or 4 spot. I'm just thinking it's going to be in around there. Sorry, Clay.
Totally fair.
4, I'm going to go Calgary Flames. I do think it might be a chemistry thing, but I think they're one of the better built teams in this division. They got the goaltending now, hopefully with Markstrom. The defense group is one of the best in this division, if not the best. And their forward group is pretty decent. I mean, if those 4 guys that we talked about step up, then they have something to be excited about. So I'm going to go 3 Montreal. I think Montreal matches up well against a lot of these teams. They're very well built. They're very deep. And I do think if Carey Price, like I said, he's going to make or break. I could see Montreal missing the playoffs if Price is mediocre, 100%. But if we get a decent Price, or at least close to what we saw in the play-in round and the playoffs, I could see Montreal making the playoffs for sure. I wouldn't say what Habs fans are saying. Number 1 in the division. Let's relax for a second. Number 2, I'll go. This is a hot take, but I'm actually going number 2, Toronto, number 1, Edmonton.
Wow.
So, big shock. You know what? I have this thing where I think Edmonton against the Canadian division, McDavid and Draisaitl, I think they're going to get pissed and go off. But against in the playoffs, I don't know. So you know what? People are going to get mad. Canucks fans are going to get at me in the comments. But this is for the season. You know what?
Yeah, this is regular season. Exactly.
Based on the predictions and based on what I see with McDavid and Draisaitl, I could see the Oilers winning the season series against Toronto possibly. I'm a Leafs fan, so I'm not just like pulling that out of my behind here. I'm thinking Edmonton could win the season series against Toronto. I think they could win the season series against Vancouver. I think they could do it against Calgary. The Battle of Alberta has been so back and forth.
Yeah.
I think they will do it against Montreal. I think they will do it against Ottawa. The only one I would question is maybe what was the other team I said? Oh, I guess Winnipeg's
the only one
screwed that up. Yeah, Winnipeg I think does well against Edmonton sometimes, but right. I meant to say Calgary might do okay. But yeah, the Battle of Alberta goes back and forth. But I do think 4 of those teams, I think Edmonton, just based on McDavid and Draisaitl, the star power might be too much for some of those other teams. And you know, Clay, I'm a hot take hockey guy. I make the hot takes. So you're not here for just a boring take. I could just go through, make everyone happy and go Vancouver first, Toronto second, and just move on with my life. But you know what? I got to piss a couple people off. So.
No, I appreciate the honesty. And Edmonton was the highest. Yeah, a couple things. Edmonton was the best team in Canada regular season-wise last year. And you're right. Actually, Vancouver, I think, using the same stat that Montreal is really good against Canadian teams, Vancouver struggle. They struggle against Winnipeg always. They split between Edmonton and Calgary, and then they don't do well against Toronto for whatever reason. So, you're not going too crazy there. So to summarize, you have in your predictions, you have Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal, Calgary, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Ottawa.
Yes. And I think the biggest thing I got to say to that and people watching is this Canadian division is likely going to be really close. So when I make these predictions, I could see Edmonton and Vancouver be separated by literally 10 points or less.
Yeah.
That might be crazy to say, but that's how close I think this division is going to be.
Yeah.
1 to 5 is going to be insanely close, I think.
I agree. And it's funny, John, my predictions are actually closer to your power rankings than they are to your predictions. So I actually think I have Ottawa at 7. I have Winnipeg at 6. So we match up there. Then I have Edmonton at 5. I'm just not sold on them. I have Montreal 4, Vancouver 3. Maybe that's a bit of a homer thing there. And then I have Calgary 2 and Toronto 1. So like I said, those are almost identical to your power rankings.
Close to my power rankings.
As opposed to your predictions. Well, I can't wait to see how this turns out. And John, thanks for joining and thanks for helping me kick off this series. And yeah, whether you're watching this live as we premiere this or you're checking this out a couple days later, make sure that you follow John and his channel, Hot Take Hockey. Yeah, is that where people can find you both on YouTube and on Twitter, John?
Yeah, so Hot Take Hockey on YouTube, and then Instagram and Twitter, Hot Take Hockey as well. You can hit me up there.
Awesome, John. Thanks again for sharing your expertise and enjoy these games. I know I will, and I can't wait to see Vancouver and Toronto face off for the first time.
Yeah. Hey, thank you so much for having me, Clay. I really appreciate it.
All right, brother. God bless you. All right.